your company tonight, and I see a few new faces, new to me. I'm that much more happy. Didn't I ever met you before?
Yeah.
Hi.
Aryan. My name is Aryan.
Aryan.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful name. Did you just move here, or I just somewhere other never met you?
This is my second week.
Oh, second week. Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm not sure I ever met you before either.
My name is Oscar.
Oscar, nice. Mahat over here.
Nice to meet you.
And I think I met you, right?
No.
No.
I'm from San Diego, maybe we'll
Oh, really?
we both-
You're from San Diego. What are you doing up here?
Just traveling around.
Sure, okay, like me. Need a ride back?
Please? Oh, well, that's my family.
Cool. Nice to meet you. What's your
My
name?
name's
David. Cool.
Mahat.
First time.
Harshni. Nice to meet you. And
Durgesh.
Durgesh. Nice to meet you, Durgesh. You're a couple?
Yes.
And you live in Sacramento. Sorry, I'm being lazy here. I guess that's the common theme where there's a lot of some people tend to be a little lazy. So Southern California, and I grew up in the Mediterranean where there's a lot of sun, so people abbreviate everything. Okay, one of the main challenges or tasks, you hurt your arm or something? Too much japa. It's the right hand. Maybe too much typing already.
Yeah,
Is it?
no, I fell off my bike. I was changing the bike. Last time we
So a task that every speaker has is to present attention, create a question in the mind of the listener, and then in the way of amusement of the listener tries to resolve this tension. So I will try to do the same thing. This is not here just to entertain everyone, but this is something that comes from a history of religion. It really doesn't matter what religious tradition one might have been associated over time. This is very much universal. Those who are fond of wisdom and human experience, and especially human spiritual experience within religious paradigm, should find this interesting. And I will present this tension by a statement. And I have heard the statement great number of times. And last time when I heard it, I thought I should make a presentation on it. Because it just triggered all this thinking. So what was the statement? The statement was, there were two people, and one person was talking to the other, asking the other person, so, what are your plans? Do you have any plans? Okay, now you're here, and then what are your plans? And the answer was, I have no plans. What God wants, that will happen. And so when I heard this, I thought, no, that's not right. It sounds very spiritual. But it isn't. And it's not spiritual for the following reasons. And I will repeat the statement. The question was, okay, you're here, so what are your plans? Do you have any plans? What are your plans now? And the person answered, I have no plans. I have no plans. What God wants, that will happen. So this sounds very spiritual, but there's a big trouble with this. And we shall see how this trouble has manifested throughout history in many different spiritual communities, and probably within our own minds. So one thing that's problematic with this statement is that the person interpreted the question, what are your plans? Interpreted this question as an impossible question. Why? Because only what God wants will happen. In other words, only what God wants will happen means that whatever I want will not happen. And no matter what I want may or may not happen. But if God wants it, it will happen. So it doesn't matter what I want. It absolutely doesn't matter. This was the interpretation. And this is a very wrong interpretation. As a matter of fact, throughout the history of different religious communities, spiritual communities, this kind of thinking has created a lot of violence, for example, this kind of thinking. Number one, if it presumes determinism. If I pull out the gun and shoot, that's also God's will. So, in other words, everything's God's will. There's no responsibility resting on my shoulders. I can do anything I want to, because it's not me doing it, it's all God's work. And many people and many communities have taken this to such an extreme where they have actually engaged in acts of senseless violence. And where does it come from? From the thinking that I have no responsibility. Everything, it's stated in many different traditions, right? That not a blade of grass moves without God's sanction. So if I killed someone, it was sanctioned by God. So should be man, should be divine. But not quite. How many of us would agree with this? When we witness violence or a horrible act, just a vicious, vile act, unless we're mentally deprived, we would definitely feel not well about it. And we would feel, when we see a breach of justice, we feel bad about it. With the explosion of, oh, by the way, I have my phone on me too, I should silence it. Oops. Yep, that should do it. With the explosion of social media, there's so much monitoring of people who are in a position of power. So if a police officer abuses a powerful position, or a politician abuses their powerful position, much of the world gets to know it really fast. And how do people react? They get very upset. This is injustice. But if everything is God's will, how can that be injustice? And why are we reacting like that? So we should look at this for a second. One major problem that I have listed here with the statement is that if everything is God's will, that means that our suffering and enjoyment is an imposition, is forced upon us. That our suffering and our enjoyment is forced upon us by God. Which would make God a horrible being. Imagine, you can be happy whenever I want, and when I don't want, if I want you to be miserable, you're just miserable. And it has nothing to do whether you're a good person or not, just because I want it. That would make me a terrible monster. And unfortunately, some people have developed this kind of concept of God. So much so that in modern, contemporary American, Western society, when you mention the G word, God, some people have severe emotional reactions to it. I was there when one fellow told my spiritual teacher that he didn't believe in God, and my spiritual teacher's response was, "What kind of God? I probably don't believe in that kind either." So different people have really developed different concepts of God. So to say that everything depends on God, nothing depends on me, is to say that our own happiness and distress also depend on God. And therefore, when we're suffering, there's no point to it. We have not caused it by any means. It's been just imposed upon us. And this is evil. This is plain evil. And definitely in Vaishnava scriptures, which is a tradition that I participate in, this is definitely not agreed upon. So the point here is that the soul, not God, is responsible for one's own happiness and distress. And this is straight from the Bhagavad Gita. Purusha sukha dukhanam bhoktritve hetu uchate. Hetu, the cause, uchate is called who? Purusha, the soul. The soul is said to be the cause of one's own happiness and distress, not God. This is very interesting. For many people this is a bad news, but we should actually be very happy about this. That means that we have power in our own hands to make our lives happy or miserable. We actually have that power according to this. According to the previous statement that the answer that fellow gave, we don't have any power to do anything about our own happiness and distress. But we actually do. Soul, not God, is responsible for our own happiness and distress. Which means that we have to make choices. And if we observe our lives, we see that we have to make choices all the time. Every one of you tonight has made a choice to be here. I mean, our choices might be influenced by people, by situations, by circumstances, but at the end of the day, so to speak, we actually make the choice. We make the choice. Like people who smoke cigarettes and try to quit. They make the choice to quit or not to quit. And then when they quit, they make the choice to resume again. I mean, you could be blaming tobacco and tobacco industries and tobacco advertisements, but you ultimately make the choice. So it is our responsibility. And we make choices. We absolutely make choices, which is a difficulty for many people, and which is one of the reasons why people go around and ask other people for opinion. Man, help me. What kind of choice should I make here? Right? And then we go to different people for advice and ask our friends, and then if we have some people who we know that we think are wise, we go to these people and we try to come up with the best possible course of action. In other words, to make the best possible choice. So we obviously do have choices. And God wants us to make choices. God wants us to make choices and wants us to make plans. Wants us to make choices and wants us to make plans. We absolutely have to make choices, because if it's not us who's making choices, why are we then sometimes happy and sometimes not? If that is not the result of our own choices, it means that someone else is imposing happiness and distress on us. And even if it's not God, would make God a bad person. If God is some kind of a powerful being that can change things, why would this person make the world such a place where someone else's choice can influence our own happiness and distress? So happiness and distress is a choice that we have in our own hands. We may not know that eating unhealthy food leads to misery. But when we experience misery, then we question ourselves. Why my stomach hurts? Well, maybe you shouldn't have eaten the packaging, the container with the food. You should have just taken the food and left the plastic container. Gee, they shouldn't have even made them. They're nearly indestructible. You can't even recycle them, really. So not to want to make plans is to actually not to want to take responsibility. It's to not to want to take responsibility. But on one hand, this is a great news that we have, our happiness is in our hands. Like we have the power to make ourselves happy. This is the good news. And God leaves this choice in our hands. Not in His hands. So I will move on. The other thing to say, I make no plans, is to lie through one's own teeth. Everyone always makes plans. Everyone makes short-term plans and long-term plans. Right? You made the choice to educate your kids at home. Right? You made the choice to come over here tonight. You made a choice to shave your head. You made a choice to put on a tilak. You made a choice to move to Sacramento, and so on. You always make choices. And then when he's asked, so what are your plans? To say, I have no plans. Whatever God wants will happen. This is just such a lie. We always make plans and we always make choices. What I'm trying to say, this is unavoidable. And so therefore it should indicate to us that it's a normal thing. It's a normal thing to make plans and make choices. Intelligent people make short-term plans and long-term plans. Like for example, when I eat, just for example, I'm careful about what I eat. I don't eat indiscriminately. First I eat only Krishna Prasada. And then I also try to take food that is healthy. I try to not to take unhealthy food because I know what the result is. So we always make plans. A friend of mine, I remember this was, it was 1987, and we were sitting in the living room of my friend's house, and some devotees, monks, they came to the house. We invited them, we met him early, and we invited them to his home. And so they came, and these devotees, understanding that we were a little spiritually inclined, they tried to accelerate our spiritual growth. So they were trying to tell us, just give yourself, throw yourself into the hands of God, like this. And then the typical English phrase is surrender yourself to God. And it comes from the Sanskrit word prapadyate. Pad means a foot, and pra means forward. Forward foot means to make a step forward. In other words, come closer to something. So prapadyate means to come closer to God. And it is commonly translated into English as surrender oneself to God. So it means, just like if you want to enter a club, right? You have to get the membership, and each club is defined by certain characteristics. Like if you want to become a member of a rowing club, well, you gotta row. Or if you want to become a member of a basketball team, that way you have to shoot a ball into the basket, and so on. So similarly, to come into God's presence entails to become godly. To become godly. And so therefore, the idea of prapadyate, meaning approaching God, means to become godly, to become pure, and so on. And consequentially, this term was translated into English as surrender to God. So we speak like this, oh man, surrender to God. And so these devotees were speaking to us like this, surrender to God, why don't you give yourself to God? And then at one point, my friend, trying to sound all spiritual, right? He said, I will surrender to God when God wants me to. This is a classic, right? Come on, man, he wants you to do that. That's your choice. You've been given this choice since ever, and forever you're going to have this choice. This is a choice that always lies with you. Don't put that on God. It's on you to make this choice. And you can make that choice now. When God calls me, God calls you all the time. God calls everyone all the time. That's not Krishna called Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He didn't tell him you have to become a sannyasi, mendicant. So to be called by God, we are everyone's called by God at all times. Somehow or other, some people interpret that being called by God means to take to the life of a monk or something like that. Sure, maybe monk too, but to live a godly life is is the way to live. That is the ultimate form of existence, in which everything we currently do gains meaning. Whether we maintain a family, whatever we might be doing, responding to God's call makes everything we do meaningful. Otherwise, it's just a waste of time. And this is a philosophical statement, not a religious statement. So, so this was his response. I will surrender when God wants me to. And it stems from this same misunderstanding. You know, God makes plans. I make no plans. That's such a lie. I mean, this friend of mine, I knew and I know he was and he's still making plans. All kinds of plans, except prapadyate, right? Except the one to give himself to God. Now, in the Vaishnava or Bhakti tradition, the life of Bhakti or devotional spiritual life is divided into 3 phases, roughly, just to give us a clue as to where we are and where we could be. And so first stage is called sadhana, bhakti. The other stage is called bhava bhakti, and the third one is called prema bhakti. So sadhana means practice. And the very definition of sadhana bhakti is to use out of our own volition, our own senses, such as our mind, our intelligence, our limbs, our legs, our hands, our body, everything we have in service of God. This is definition of sadhana bhakti. That we make the decision to serve God with our own current faculties. That God, it's not up to God to make that decision. We have to make that decision. Otherwise, God would be a monster. Can you imagine if the perfection of life is spiritual development, depends on God, and you are not God conscious? That means God put that ignorance on you and made you suffer for no good reason. So to make this kind of a statement is actually disrespectful to the beautiful character, divine character of Krishna. Like every good parent, like every good pedagogue means a teacher. Like every good parent, like every good teacher, Krishna does what? Also teaches. And it teaches us wisdom. Teaches us wisdom so we can differentiate good from bad. From that which leads to happiness, from that which does not lead to happiness. And that's all Krishna does. And it's up to us to make the choice. Ya tejasi tata kuru. Krishna told Arjuna, I have taught you all of this, now you do as you want. But that is the point. Krishna teaches. He's not twisting our arms and, no, now you are spiritual, no, now you're not spiritual, because I desire so. And the same thing does the spiritual teacher. Spiritual teacher, believe it or not, only teaches. That is the function of the spiritual teacher. It is not to do a magical spell on someone and make someone spiritually perfect. Anyone who thinks like this is very naive about spiritual life. Spiritual teacher teaches, and we make choices and execute choices, right? Had you not started the Shiburim books, someone has to, right? Had Prabhupada not come to America, would Krishna consciousness come? Maybe someone else would have gotten inspired. But Prabhupada did it. He took that effort. So similarly, spiritual teacher teaches, and then it is up to us to take it up or not. If we take it, great. If we don't take it, great. Your problem. Don't put it on God. So it is up to us to make these choices. And I'll give you an example of a fellow who was a very famous teacher from India, so I will not mention this person's name. But he gave this very funny story, and in many ways very sad story. A sad story because it indicates a poor fund of understanding of the very tradition that this person tried to represent. This person said that, described this incident where he blessed his disciple by putting his hands on the head of the disciple. And the disciple felt this jolt and became enlightened. And so the enlightened disciple turned to the guru and noticed that the guru was looking all miserable and depleted. And asked him, why are you looking so miserable and depleted? And the teacher said, because I have given all of the spiritual Shakti, energy, potency, power to you, and now I have none left. This is foolishness to the max. This is idiotism. Isha Upanishad, which is one of the most prominent, if not the most prominent Upanishads of all of the Upanishads. Upanishads are primary philosophical texts of Vedic tradition. And Isha Upanishad is the pinnacle of them all. Says, Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachate Purnasya Purnamevadaya Purnat Eva Vashishyate. What does this teach? This is a description of spiritual substance. And it says that the spiritual substance is complete. And from this complete spiritual substance, complete spiritual units emanate. And no matter how many complete spiritual units emanate from it, it still remains complete. So for this fool to say that he has no more spiritual potency because he has given all to his disciple, this person's a cheater. Not a teacher, but a cheater. Spiritual energy is such, the more you give it, more you will have it. Other way around. So, I wanted to tell this foolish story because some people really believe this kind of stuff. First of all, that the teacher comes and zaps a disciple, and the disciple becomes spiritually enlightened. Then why does not this person go around the world and constantly zaps everyone? Why is he discriminating between one and another person? The point is that we all have moral obligation to make the choice to become pure beings. And more we try to become pure, more we deserve attention of God and the spiritual teacher, of Guru and Krishna. And thus they will assist us more and more. More we want it, more we'll get it. But to say, no, it does not depend on me, it all depends on God, is really, really major foolishness. It's just another cheap trick of those who don't want to do it. Want to perhaps sometimes maintain the aura, the image of a spiritual person, but have no spiritual substance. Also, like every good teacher, Krishna and Guru, God and the spiritual teacher, they don't want the students, disciples, to be like tools. What are tools? Tools are things that you pick up, turn on, they work, then you turn them off and then they don't work. That's tools. We're not tools. Neither spiritual teacher, neither Krishna want us to be tools in this sense of a matter, but want us to learn right from wrong, to become pure and elevated beings, so that we can act morally and purely and so on. Not that when God wants, things will happen. When God doesn't want, they won't happen. There was I personally witnessed this, and name withheld again. Because unfortunately I saw this within the Vaishnava tradition. A student approached the teacher, the Guru, and asked the teacher, Guruji, when will you give me your mercy? And the teacher thought for a moment. He said, "Not just yet." um, I guess I won't comment on this. I'll just read a quick story from Prabhupada's life. Srila Prabhupada, our founder of this movement.